Let me tell you something before I start. I've worked the streets around that palace for 9 years. 9 summers. I've seen a man propose on one knee right in front of the gates while a pigeon walked across his shoe. I've seen a woman faint from the heat and 3 strangers catch her before she hit the pavement. I've seen tourists cry, actual tears, just from watching the guards march. But I have never seen anything like what I saw that Tuesday. And I'll be honest with you, I still think about it. I think about it when I can't sleep. I think about the boy's face. I think about the sound. And most of all, I think about that one man in the red tunic who did not move when every single nerve in his body must have been screaming at him to run. So sit with me a minute, let me take you back. It was July. Late July, that kind of London heat that nobody believes London is capable of until they're standing in it. The pavement gave off this shimmer. You could smell hot stone and exhaust, and somewhere underneath it cut grass from the park. The flags hung dead still. Not a breath of wind. The kind of day where even the pigeons looked tired. I had a tour group that morning. 12 people. A retired couple from Ohio, a school trip from Manchester, 2 backpackers from Spain who kept asking if the guards were real soldiers or just for show. I told them what I always tell people. They're real, I said. Trained army. That bearskin hat alone weighs more than a sack of sugar. They stand there in this heat, full uniform, and they don't talk to you. They don't look at you, and no, you can't make them laugh, so please don't try. Somebody always tries. We made our way up toward the forecourt. The crowd was thick that day, phones up everywhere. A sea of arms holding little glowing rectangles. Somebody's child was crying about ice cream. A busker down the road was murdering a Beatles song on a cheap guitar. Normal, completely normal. There was one guard posted near the side approach. Not the main parade, this was a quieter post, off to the flank, near a gate that the public doesn't really pay attention to. Most days nobody even photographs him. He just stands there, rifle held just so, eyes forward, while the world flows past him like a river around a rock. I'd seen him before. You start to recognize them after a while, even though they all look the same to a tourist. This one had a particular stillness. Some of the younger lads, you can see them shift their weight, blink a bit too much, swallow. Not him. He stood like the building behind him had grown a person. I didn't know his name then. I learned it later. Tom Reeves, 26 years old. From somewhere up north, a town I'd never heard of, the kind of place with one chip shop and a war memorial. That's him, remember him, he matters. Now here's where it starts to turn. Around 11, maybe a bit before, this car pulls up, not at the public side, near the staff and official approach where the bollards are, sleek black thing, the kind that costs more than my flat, and out of the back steps this young man. I clocked him straight away, the way you clock certain people. He had that walk. You know the one. The walk of somebody who has never once in his life had to wait in a queue. Linen jacket, sunglasses pushed up into his hair, phone in one hand like it was glued there. Couldn't have been older than 20. Now I want to be careful here because I've thought about how to describe him. He wasn't just any rich kid. There were whispers in the crowd within about 30 seconds. People recognized faces. A woman next to me grabbed her friend's arm and went, "Isn't that's her son? The Duchess. That's the Ashbourne boy." Julian, that was the name going round. Julian Ashbourne. His mother was a duchess, proper old title, fixture at every garden party, the sort of woman whose hats make the newspapers. And this was her son. Privilege poured into a person and given legs. He walked straight up toward the side gate, toward Tom Reeves's post. And he expected it to open. You could see it in his body. He didn't slow down. He didn't reach for a pass. He just walked, like the gate was a door in his own home and the man in front of it was furniture. Tom Reeves did not move. I want you to understand the geometry of this, because it matters. The boy gets close, 3 feet maybe, and he says something. I couldn't hear it from where I was, but I saw his mouth move and I saw him gesture toward the inner courtyard. toward, as it turned out, the route that leads to the state rooms. The throne room. The whole golden heart of the place that tourists pay through the nose to glimpse for 90 seconds in summer. Tom didn't answer. Guards on post don't chat. There's a protocol. If a guard needs to communicate, there are specific things he can do. A sentry can challenge, can call for the duty officer, can take a single rehearsed step and stamp in present arms. But he does not stand there and bicker with you. So the boy says it again, louder this time. I caught the end of it. Know who my mother is. And still Tom did not move. There's a thing I've never been able to explain to people who weren't there. The crowd went quiet, not all at once. It rippled. The folks closest noticed first, and then it spread back through the throng like a cold draft until even the busker stopped playing. A few hundred people, all suddenly watching one young man in linen get politely, immovably refused by one young man in red. The boy took off his sunglasses. That's when I knew it was going to get ugly. People who are used to being obeyed do a specific thing when they're not. They make it personal. They start looking for the human inside the uniform so they can hurt it. I have an appointment, he said, and now I could hear him clearly because the world had gone so still. My mother is inside. I am expected. You are going to step aside. Nothing. Do you understand English? Nothing. And here's the part that got under my skin that still gets under my skin. The boy leaned in, close to Tom's face, and he said very quietly, but I was near enough now, I drifted closer without realizing, the whole crowd had, he said. You're nobody, you know that, you're a costume. A costume. I looked at Tom's eyes. You're not supposed to be able to read anything in a guard's eyes, that's the whole point of the training. But I swear to you, just for a fraction of a second, something passed behind them. Not anger. I'd have understood anger. It was something steadier and sadder than that. Like a man who has heard worse in worse places from worse people and has long since decided that none of it gets to touch him. He didn't blink. The boy stepped back furious and pulled out his phone and started filming Tom's face, narrating it. This is the guard refusing me, this is him. Look at him. The way these kids do, like the camera is a weapon that turns other people into content. And that pathetic little standoff, the rich boy and his phone and the silent soldier, that was the situation. That's where we were. A tourist drama. The kind of thing that would have ended up as a forgettable 40-second clip with a caption full of crying laughing emojis. It would have been a story about an entitled kid and a disciplined guard. A small story. Then the ground hit us. I don't have a good word for the sound. People always want me to describe it, and I never can. It wasn't a bang. A bang is too clean. This came up through your feet before it reached your ears. A deep, ugly thud that you felt in your back teeth and the bones of your chest, and then half a second later the noise of it, rolling in from the east, from the direction of the park. From Hyde Park or near it, the green edge of the city, where on any normal summer day there are deck chairs and dogs and people eating sandwiches with their shoes off. The whole forecourt flinched. As one body, hundreds of people, all ducking the same instinctive inch, the way you do when something passes too close to your head. For one full second, nobody made a sound. And then everybody made every sound. I have never heard screaming like it, and I hope I never do again. It wasn't dramatic film screaming. It was raw, animal. A mother somewhere behind me started shouting a name over and over. The pigeons went up all at once in this great gray explosion, hundreds of them beating into the dead still air. A car alarm started, then another, then about 9 more, a chorus of them spreading outward. And the crowd broke. You think you know what a crowd looks like when it panics, but you don't, not really, not until you're inside one. It stops being people. It becomes a current. Bodies surging in 3 directions at once, nobody agreeing on where safety is. A pushchair got knocked sideways and I watched a stranger, just some bloke in a football shirt, throw himself down to shield the baby in it with his own back while the crowd trampled past. I lost two of my own tour group in about 4 seconds. The couple from Ohio. I never even saw which way they went. I got shoved hard against the railings, cracked my elbow on the iron, didn't even feel it till hours later. And in the middle of all of it, the screaming, the alarms, the river of terrified people, I looked back at the gate. At Tom Reeves. And I will tell you what he was doing. Nothing. He was standing exactly where he had been standing, rifle held just so, eyes forward, the same stillness. The bearskin hadn't shifted an inch. Around him the entire world was coming apart, and Tom Reeves stood his post like a stone in a flood. Now you might be thinking, well, that's training, isn't it? That's just discipline. The army drills it into them. And yes, it is. But I want you to understand what I was actually watching, because at the time I didn't understand it either. I thought, for a horrible moment, that he was frozen. That fear had locked him up. I almost shouted at him to move, to run, to take cover like the rest of us were trying to. I'm glad I didn't, because I'd have been wrong and I'd have been ashamed of it ever after. He wasn't frozen. He was deciding to stay. There's a difference. There's all the difference in the world. A man who is frozen has lost control of his body. A man who stays has taken hold of it and forced it to do the hardest thing a body can be asked to do, which is to stand exactly where the danger is loudest and not flinch, because behind him, behind that gate, down that approach, past the inner court, were people. People he was sworn to stand between. He didn't know what the explosion was. None of us did. For all Tom Reeves knew in that moment, a bomb in the park was the opening note of something far worse, and the next move was a man coming through that very gate he was guarding. So he did the thing that makes no sense to a civilian and perfect sense to a soldier. He held the line. And here's the part that I've never told many people, because it sounds made up, and I swear on everything that it isn't. The boy, Julian, the Duchess's son who'd called him a costume. He hadn't run either. He couldn't. The crowd had surged and pinned him against the bollard at an angle, and he'd gone down, fallen, or been knocked. I don't know, and he was on the ground now, half under the press of fleeing people, his phone gone, his sunglasses crushed somewhere under 100 feet, and he was screaming. Not the cocky narration from before. Proper, childlike, terrified screaming. A 20-year-old calling for his mum in a voice that had lost every single one of its years. 2 minutes earlier, that boy had leaned into Tom Reeves's face and told him he was nobody. And now he was lying 3 feet from him, about to be crushed. I saw Tom's eyes move. Just his eyes, down to the boy. And I watched a man do arithmetic with his whole life, in the space of a single breath. I'm going to stop there for a moment, because what Tom Reeves did next is the thing this whole story turns on, and it deserves more than a rushed sentence at the bottom of a page. I'll tell you this much before I go on. When people ask me, and they do ask when this comes up, what kind of person stands still while a bomb goes off, I used to think the answer was a brave one, a trained one, a hard one. I don't think that anymore. I think the answer is a person who has decided that the people behind him matter more than the fear in front of him. And I think that the moment Tom Reeves looked down at the boy who'd insulted him, the spoiled, frightened, screaming boy, he had to decide that all over again. Right there, from scratch, with the whole world on fire. What he did knowing exactly who that boy was, and exactly what that boy had said to him 90 seconds before. That's where I'll pick it up, where I left you. The boy on the ground, the crowd stamping over him, the alarms, the screaming, the pigeons still wheeling overhead in that panicked gray cloud, and Tom Reeves standing his post, looking down at Julian Ashbourne with eyes that were doing a kind of maths the rest of us couldn't see. Let me slow this part right down, because it happened fast, the whole thing, start to finish. Couldn't have been more than 15 seconds, but in my memory it plays out slow, frame by frame, like somebody's holding their thumb on the film. Here's the thing you have to understand about where the boy fell. He hadn't fallen into open space. If he had, the crowd would have parted round him eventually, the way water finds its way past a stone. No. He'd gone down right at the base of the bollard in the pinch point, where the railings funnel everybody into a narrow channel as they flee. It's bad design, honestly. I'd complained about that corner to the council years before, for completely boring reasons, never once imagining it'd matter like this. And in a stampede, a pinch point is where people die. Not from the bomb, from each other. From the press of bodies, the weight of 100 terrified strangers all trying to get through a gap built for 10. The boy was on his side, one arm up over his head, and I could see his face going from white to a color I didn't have a name for, and his mouth was open, but I couldn't hear him anymore over everything else. He was about 4 seconds from being gone, maybe less. And nobody was stopping. That's the part that haunts me, if I'm honest, not the boy but everyone else, because they weren't cruel. They weren't monsters. They were just frightened out of their minds, and a frightened mind has one instruction and one only, and that instruction is away. Away from the noise, away from the danger. They literally could not see him. He'd become part of the ground. I tried to get to him. I want that on the record for whatever it's worth. I shoved off the railing and I tried to push back against the current toward where he was, and I got about 2 feet before a shoulder caught me in the sternum and put me right back where I started, gasping. I'm not a big man. The crowd was the crowd. There was nothing I could do. There was nothing any of us could do. Except one. Tom Reeves broke his post. I need you to feel the weight of that, because if you've never stood near these men, you won't. A guard on sentry does not leave his post. It's not a strong suggestion. It's the spine of the entire thing. That post is his, and he holds it, and the holding of it is the whole reason he's there. Men have been disciplined, careers ended for far smaller breaks than walking away from a sentry position. And there's the deeper reason, the one I talked about before. He didn't know what the bomb meant. For all he knew, leaving that gate open for 10 seconds was exactly what the whole thing was, for a distraction, a draw, get the sentry to move and the doors unguarded. Every instinct his training had carved into him said hold. He moved anyway. He came off that gate in 2 strides, and the rifle, I noticed even then, he kept controlled, kept safe, muzzle managed even in the middle of all this. Because some things are so deep in a man they don't switch off even when the world's ending, and he got to the boy and he did not hesitate. He got low, wide stance, like a man bracing against a tide, because that's what he was doing. And he reached down and he got a fist in the back of that linen jacket and he hauled. You wouldn't believe the strength of it. The boy must have had 3 or 4 people's worth of weight pressing across him by then, but Tom dragged him up and back, in toward the gate, in toward the one bit of dead space the railings created in the lee of the post. And then, and this is the bit I'll see until I die, he didn't just dump the boy and step away. He put himself between the boy and the crowd. He turned his own back to the stampede, braced his shoulders, took the press of all those bodies on his own frame, in his big, stupid, heavy uniform in that heat, and held a pocket of space open with nothing but his own body so that the boy could get his face off the ground and breathe. A man he had every reason on earth to let drown. I started crying. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. Right there against the railings, with my elbows screaming and my tour group scattered to the 4 winds and a bomb still echoing somewhere in my chest, I cried like a child. I couldn't have told you exactly why in that second. I think some part of me had just watched the best of what a person can be, in the middle of the worst of what a day can be, and the body doesn't have a tidy response to that. It just leaks. And the boy, Julian. He was clinging to Tom's arm, both hands. Gripping the red sleeve like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. And he was looking up at Tom's face, that same face he'd filmed and mocked 90 seconds before, and I could read his lips even if I couldn't hear him, and he was saying it over and over. Sorry, 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 sorry. Tom never looked at him, eyes up, scanning, Still on the job, even now checking the rooftops, the approaches, the crowd, reading the threat. He had one hand braced behind him, keeping the boy tucked in, and the rest of him was still a soldier doing soldier's work. But once, just once, I saw him lean his head down a fraction near the boy's ear and say something. Short. A few words. I found out later what it was. I'll get to that. It's the line I think about most. Now, while this was happening, this little island of stillness in the middle of the flood, the rest of the response was kicking in, and it kicked in fast. That's the thing people don't realize about a place like that. It looks like tourists and pageantry and a bloke in a funny hat. But underneath, it's one of the most protected square miles on the planet, and when something goes bang nearby, the calm postcard peels away in about 8 seconds flat, and you see the machine that was always underneath. Gates I didn't even know where gates started closing. Steel, fast, officers, proper armed police, the ones with the serious weapons, who you mostly never see, came out of nowhere, out of doorways and vehicles and corners, moving in that low, fast, professional way, shouting at the crowd, hands up, this way, keep moving, keep calm, this way. Their voices did something the screaming hadn't. They gave the panic a direction. And a panic with a direction stops being a stampede and starts being an evacuation. Somebody got hold of the pinch point. 2 officers planted themselves at the bollard and physically opened the flow, peeling the crush apart with their own bodies, and the pressure on Tom and the boy eased, and then eased more, and then it was gone, and the 2 of them were just kneeling there in a clearing space with debris and dropped phones and one lost child's shoe all around them. The bomb, it turned out, and I'm telling you this from what came later, not what I knew then, had gone off near the eastern edge of the park. Not in the crowd, near a service area. The details took days to settle, and I won't pretend to facts I don't have, because there are families involved and I'm not going to be loose with their grief. But I'll tell you the thing that mattered to all of us standing there terrified. It was one event. There wasn't a second one. The worst of our imaginations, that this was the start of a coordinated thing, that the next blast was coming, that the gate Tom guarded was the next target. None of that came. But here's what gets me. Tom didn't know that. Not when he moved. Not when he turned his back to the crowd. Not when he held that boy up. As far as Tom Reeves knew in the moment he chose, the second bomb was already on its way, and he'd just put himself in the open to save a stranger who'd spat in his face. He did it anyway. You can't train that. You can train the steadiness. You can train the hands and the stance and the rifle discipline. But the choice to spend yourself on someone who'd done nothing to earn it, that comes from somewhere the army can't reach. That's just who a man already is, revealed. A medic reached them. I watched a paramedic crouch by the boy and start checking him over, pupils, pulse, the works. And the boy kept trying to turn his head to keep Tom in view, kept reaching for that red sleeve, and the medic kept gently turning his chin back. Eyes on me, mate, look at me, you're all right. And here's the moment the whole forecourt, what was left of us, the ones who hadn't got clear yet, pressed back against the railings and the walls, the moment we all understood what we'd seen. A senior officer, older bloke, a lot of insignia, came over to Tom. And we all expected, I think we all expected, that Tom was about to get it. For breaking post. For leaving the gate. You could see a few people brace for it, this awful anticipation, like watching someone about to be told off for the most heroic thing you'd ever seen. The officer stopped in front of Tom, looked at him a long second. And then he put a hand on Tom's shoulder, just for a moment, and he gave him a small nod. The kind of nod that says more than a medal does, and he said something quiet, and Tom gave the smallest nod back, and that was it. That was the whole exchange. But the crowd saw it, and somebody, I don't know who, some woman near me with mascara halfway down her face, started clapping. And it caught. The way the panic had caught earlier, but the opposite of it. It rolled back through the survivors and the stragglers and the shaken-up tourists pressed against the walls. This ragged, exhausted, tearful applause, and it wasn't pretty and it wasn't organized, and it might be the most honest sound I've ever heard a crowd make. Tom didn't acknowledge it. Of course he didn't. He'd already stepped back from the boy, handed him fully to the medics, straightened his uniform with a tug. I actually saw him straighten his uniform, like that mattered, like presentation mattered after all that, and he turned, and he walked back toward his post. Back to the gate. Because his relief hadn't come yet, and until it did, that post was his. I watched a 26-year-old man who had just saved a life and stood down a bomb walk calmly back to a gate and resume his stillness, rifle held just so, eyes forward, as though the last 15 seconds had been a small interruption to his actual job. Now I told you there was a line, the thing he said in the boy's ear. I didn't hear it that day. I heard it weeks later, and I heard it from the boy himself, which is a part of the story I never expected to be able to tell. Because what happened to Julian Ashbourne after this, what that day did to him, what he became, and what his mother, the Duchess, did when she found out, that's the part nobody saw coming. That's the part that, when I learned it, made me sit down on a curb and just breathe for a while. I'll give you the shape of it before I go. The boy who called a soldier a costume did not stay the boy who called a soldier a costume. Something cracked open in him on that pavement under that crush, and what came out of the crack was a completely different person. And the first person to find out, the first person he went to, wasn't his mother, wasn't his friends, wasn't a lawyer or a publicist or any of the people that boys like that usually run to. It was Tom. He came back to the gate to find the costume. And what happened when he did, and what the Duchess did when she turned up, is where this story stops being about a bomb at all, and starts being about something a lot harder and a lot better. I told you I'd tell you the line. I'll get there, but I have to take you through the weeks first because the line doesn't mean anything without them. And anyway, that's how it happened to me, slowly in pieces, the way the truth usually arrives. Not all at once with a drum roll, in bits, over coffee, from people who were there. So let me tell you what came after. The forecourt closed for days. Cordons, white tents, men in coveralls walking the ground inch by inch. The whole area went quiet in a way I'd never heard it, no buskers, no tour groups, no me. I sat at home for the first 2 days and didn't do much of anything. Couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes I felt that thud come up through my feet again. My wife kept finding me standing in the kitchen holding a mug of tea gone stone cold, staring at nothing. The clip got out, of course. Not the bomb, well, that too, but the other clip. Julian's own video. The one he'd filmed to humiliate Tom. This is the guard refusing me, look at him, this is him. The boy's sneering little narration. It went everywhere, and people are not kind to a face like that. Within a day his name was a punchline, his mother's title was dragged into it. There were think pieces, there were nasty montages. The internet had found its villain for the week and it went to work. And here's the strange, sour thing. The same internet didn't have the second half of the video. Julian had been filming Tom when the bomb hit. The phone went flying when the crowd took him down. So the footage just stopped, cut off mid-sneer with the thud and then nothing. Which meant the world saw the boy at his absolute worst and never saw what came 30 seconds later, never saw him on the ground, never saw the red sleeve he clung to, never saw the sorry. For about a week, the entire country thought it knew exactly who Julian Ashbourne was. The entire country was wrong, and the funny part is, so was he. He'd thought he knew who he was too. The bomb disagreed with both of them. I didn't get the full story of what happened next from the news, because the news never got it. I got it because of a coincidence so daft I almost don't believe it myself. About 3 weeks after, the forecourt reopened and I went back to work because what else do you do? And one morning, quiet morning, thin crowd, I'm doing my usual patter near the railings when I notice a young man hanging back at the edge of things. Hood up, head down, not filming. Not pushing forward, just watching the side gate. Watching Tom's post. It took me a good 30 seconds to place him without the linen jacket and the sunglasses and the swagger. And when I did, my stomach dropped, because here was the most hated face in Britain standing 20 feet from me, looking like he'd lost about 2 stone and most of his sleep. I'll be straight with you, my first instinct was something ugly. Good. Let him stew. I'd watched this kid call a hero a costume. Part of me was glad the world had eaten him alive. But I watched him a bit longer, and it wasn't a sulking that I was looking at. It was something else. He'd been standing there a long time. He kept starting forward and stopping, like a man trying to make himself walk into cold water. And eventually he did it. He walked up toward the gate, toward Tom. Same as 3 weeks before, except every single thing about it was different now. He didn't expect the gate to open this time. He didn't walk like he owned the place. He came up slow, hands visible, well back from the line, and he stopped at a respectful distance, and he just stood there, in front of the man he'd insulted, waiting to be acknowledged by someone who, by every rule of that post, could not and would not acknowledge him at all. Tom didn't move, eyes forward, rifle just so. The boy was nobody to that post now, same as everybody's nobody to that post. That's the brutal fairness of it. But here's what the boy did. He waited patiently for the changing of the sentries. He'd clearly looked it up. He knew there'd be a moment on the relief when the guard coming off duty steps down and becomes, briefly, just a man walking. And when that moment came, when Tom was relieved and stepped down off the post and started the march off, the boy fell in alongside him, well clear, hands still visible, and he said quietly to the side of Tom's face, "I know you can't talk on post. I waited, I'm sorry. I needed to say it to you properly, off your post, where you're allowed to be a person." And Tom Reeves stopped. I was close enough now. I drifted over the way I did that first day. Some instinct that knew this mattered. Tom turned, off duty now, just a man for a moment, and he looked at the boy, properly, the way he hadn't been able to that first day. And the boy fell apart, right there, just came undone. Said the whole thing in a rush, that he'd watched the clip of himself 100 times and hated the person in it, that he couldn't believe what he'd said, a costume, that Tom had every reason to let him get crushed and instead had turned his own back to a bomb to keep him breathing, that he didn't understand why, that he hadn't slept, that he didn't know who he'd been or who he was supposed to be now. And Tom listened to all of it, patient, unhurried, the same stillness he gave the gate he gave the boy. And then he said the thing. He said, and I heard this one with my own ears, 3 weeks after I'd missed the first one. "I didn't pull you up because of who your mom is, and I didn't leave you down there because of what you said. I did it because you were a person on the ground. That's the whole of it. You don't owe me anything for that. Just be the kind of bloke who'd do the same. That clears the debt." That's it, that's the line. Be the kind of bloke who'd do the same. That clears the debt. The boy nodded like his neck had stopped working properly, and Tom gave him a short nod back, the same kind of nod the senior officer had given Tom. I realized that economy these men have, where a small movement of the head carries the weight of a speech. And then Tom straightened his uniform, that little tug, and marched off to wherever guards go, and that was that. The most hated young man in Britain stood on the pavement and watched him go, and then he turned around, and the hood came back, and he walked off into the crowd. Nobody recognized him. He'd become invisible the way the truly humbled do. Now the Duchess. You'd expect, given everything, that a duchess whose son had been publicly torn to ribbons would come out swinging. Lawyers, statements, damage control. Get the boy on a sympathetic morning program, soften the edges, manage the brand. That's the playbook. That's what people like that do. She didn't do any of it. What she did, and I only know this because it got out later, properly out, in a way that made even the nasty corners of the internet go quiet for a bit, was she wrote a letter, by hand, to Tom Reeves's commanding officer. And she didn't ask for anything to be hushed up, and she didn't make excuses for her son. She thanked the man who'd saved a boy that, by her own words, had not earned saving. She wrote, and this part got quoted with her permission, That her son had been raised with every advantage, and somewhere along the way she had failed to give him the only one that mattered, which was the understanding that no person is a costume, and no person is furniture, and the man at the gate is as real and as full as the woman in the palace. She wrote that a soldier had taught her son in 15 seconds what she'd failed to teach him in 20 years, and that she would spend the rest of her life grateful and ashamed in roughly equal measure. And then she did the thing that I think actually changed something. She made it public, on purpose. Not to rehabilitate the boy, she was careful about that. She didn't ask anyone to forgive him. She made it public because she said the country had seen her son at his worst and deserved to see that worst answered honestly by his own family without spin. She said her son didn't deserve a clean slate, but that Tom Reeves deserved to be known for what he did. And the only way to make him known was to put her own family's shame next to his courage and let people look at both. That's a rare thing. I've thought about it a lot. It would have been so much easier to fight or to hide. She did neither. She just told the truth and stood in it. As for the boy, Julian, I don't want to wrap him up in too neat a bow because people don't transform like a film. Cynics will say it won't last, that a fright wears off and the old self crawls back. Maybe. I don't know him. I only know what I saw and what I heard. What I heard was that he didn't go back to the linen jacket life. That he asked his mother, not told, to stop the allowance for a while, and that he went and did something ordinary and useful that I won't name because he asked for that part to be kept quiet, and as far as I know he's still doing it. Quietly. No camera. The opposite of the boy in the clip in every way. Be the kind of bloke who'd do the same. That clears the debt. I think he's trying to clear it. I think he might be at it for the rest of his life. And I think Tom Reeves would say that's exactly right, because that's how it works. You don't clear that kind of debt with a payment. You clear it by becoming a different person, and then staying that person, day after ordinary day, when no bomb is going off and nobody's watching. And Tom didn't want any of it. That's the most Tom part of the whole thing. There was talk of an award. I think there genuinely was some recognition, quiet and official, the kind these men actually respect, but he gave no interviews, said nothing public. Somebody from a paper apparently got to him and asked him how it felt to be a hero, and he's supposed to have said, "I stood where I was put. That's the job." And that was the entire quote. They couldn't get another word out of him. I still see him sometimes. On the gate. Eyes forward, rifle just so, that stillness like the building grew a person. Tourists walk past and photograph him and try to make him laugh and have no idea, not the faintest idea, that the silent man in the funny hat once turned his back on a bomb for a stranger who'd insulted him, and then told that stranger he owed him nothing. They see a costume. I see Tom Reeves. So that's the story. That's the whole of it, as near as I can tell it true. People ask me what the lesson is, like there's supposed to be one tidy thing you carry away. And I never know what to say because it's not tidy. A bomb went off and people were hurt, and that's not a lesson, that's just a wound. There's no bow for that. But if you put a knife to my throat and made me say one thing I learned standing against those railings with my elbow cracked and my eyes streaming, it'd be this. You never know who's a costume and who's a person. You think you can tell from the clothes. The boy thought he could tell from the uniform. I thought I could tell from the swagger. We were both wrong. The man we'd have walked past was the one who held the line, and the boy we'd have written off had a different person waiting inside him that only a catastrophe could let out. Everybody's more than the costume. The guard, the boy, the Duchess, you, me. Tom Reeves knew that before the rest of us did. That's the whole reason he reached down. And that's why all these years on, when I can't sleep and that thud comes up through my feet again in the dark, I don't think about the bomb anymore. I think about a hand in a red sleeve reaching down into a crowd for someone who didn't deserve it. And I think, be the kind of bloke who'd do the same. I'm still trying. Most days I fall short. But I'm still trying, and I think that's the part that clears the debt.